Carey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson, the personal finance show focused on moving you forward financially. On today's show, the month of November is when we celebrate Financial Literacy Month. And this year marks the 13th annual Financial Literacy Month here in Canada. And the theme this year is managing your money in a changing world. And let's face it, things are changing. And if there isn't ever a time to grow your financial knowledge, it is now. And joining me today with some advice on how you can do this, we have Kirsten Bradley, Senior Insolvency Administrator with BDO Debt Solutions. Kirsten, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much, Shannon, for having me. It's my pleasure.
Before we get into our discussion today, can you share with us a little bit about your background and what you do exactly at BDO?
Definitely. Well, I work for BDO, which is a company that deals with various financial services, and I actually work in the debt solutions department. So I deal with people who are struggling with financial issues. They might be needing some solutions. We do some assessments. We meet and try to help people with that anxiety.
And of course, a lot of people are feeling that anxiety these days, especially with the way the economy is going. And so we're talking about November being Financial Literacy Month here in Canada. And this was first launched back in 2011 with a goal to raise awareness around financial knowledge and know-how. Because the more you know and understand, the better equipped you are when it comes to making those decisions around your financial health and your well-being. Now, improving the financial skills of Canadians is a key focus of the federal government, and it was the reason behind its national strategy for financial literacy called Count Me in Canada, which was launched back in 2015. And it continues to be a key focus today. The Financial Consumer Agency of Canada updated the national strategy in 2021, and it created a new 6-year strategy, which they call Make Change That Counts. And so with the background about Financial Literacy Month, Kirsten, I'm going to start with an obvious question. Why is financial literacy so important?
Well, it is really important. I mean, it helps us to plan. It takes some control over our budgets. We can plan for those unexpected. We can take away the fear of money, the fear of the unexpected. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. We don't know with the changing interest rates, what's going to happen with the current market. So it really helps to just take away some of that stress and really empower us to move forward.
You said that it takes away that fear, and I think that's really something that unfortunately a lot of people feel when talking about money or talking about their finances or maybe the debt load that they're carrying. Unfortunately, I think that's a common trend, and we're going to get into that a little bit into detail as we move forward. But we know that Canadians are doing a little bit better when it comes to their financial literacy. However, unfortunately, we still see surveys that show that many are still struggling, and this lack of financial know-how really impacts financial decision-making and therefore, of course, our overall financial health. There was a recent Equifax Canada survey that said that nearly half of Canadians polled say they've never received financial education at all. And about 45% worry about paying off debt, like their mortgages and their student loans. But only 18% have actually sought professional advice or counseling about debt management. And about 42% of younger adults, so those are between the ages of 18 to 38, they appear to be more likely to rely on social media for educational assistance when it comes to their finances, versus only about 22% of all respondents to the poll. And about 32% of Canadians actually have never checked their credit reports. Now, there was another recent survey. About 21% of people consider themselves to be financially literate. 50% believe they are somewhat financially literate. However, when they were asked to sort of self-assess how financially literate they are based on their understanding of various financial instruments, only about 45% considered themselves literate in any of those types of products. Now, 60% of people also admit to having personal or a monthly budget, but 29% have only taken an education course about finance or personal budget management as well. So lots of people say they have a budget, but only about 29% of them have actually taken some kind of education or educated themselves about how to manage their finances. So Kirsten, with all of those figures in your mind, what is your reaction when you hear these statistics?
Shannon, I am not surprised. These numbers really are what I'm seeing when I meet with people, what I'm seeing when I'm out in the community doing financial presentations to people. There just is not, there's not the education, which unfortunately is starting to come into our schools, but a lot of the people who are past that have never received that. It was always a taboo subject. We never talked about that with our families. We never talked about that with our parents. So I'm really not surprised by these numbers.
I do think it is improving in some ways, but you're right. If we have this fear, like I said before, about talking about our money with other people, and so it definitely makes it challenging. If somebody is actually struggling, it makes it challenging for them to reach out to the right people. And so we mentioned that the theme of this year's Financial Literacy Month campaign is managing your money in a changing world, with a key focus on equipping Canadians with practical advice and tips and tools to help them manage their debt. So do you feel, Kirsten, with this current economic climate, financial literacy and growing your financial knowledge, do you think it's more important now for Canadians?
I think it's more important now than ever. As you said, we are in a changing world right now. We've got interest rates that we haven't seen for decades. We're increasing our cost of living. The stress that people are feeling, the concerns about what tomorrow is going to bring. We're very unpredictable. There's been so many changes over the last few years, and I think this is now kind of we've hit the wall. We've hit a moment where people are now really trying to struggle to feel some control. And they need to get that control back. They need to start feeling like they're prepared for the unexpected, because, that's the tool that we have to provide to them.
Well, and you said that there's a lot of things that are changing right now. And specifically, I think about the debt loads that people are carrying now are higher than they've ever been. As well, I think there's changes in our employment market and things like that people are facing. Lots of people are heading into retirement years as well. And so planning for that can be very challenging. So I think you're right that with the way things are moving right now in our economy and our cost of living and things like that, I think it's absolutely critical that people start to look at their financial literacy and their financial wellness as they move forward. And so then, as Canadians, as we know, struggle to cope with the rising cost of living, high inflation, interest rates, many are struggling to manage their debt. And this, of course, has left many feeling anxious, they're isolated, they're feeling stressed. About 56% of people are actually saying that they're just shutting down. They're finding it a challenge to just discuss any of their financial issues, even with family or friends. And there was a recent survey by BDO Debt Solutions. It was a stigma survey. And I just want to go into a little bit of what those findings were. So Kirsten, can you sort of give us a little bit of information about this survey and what are some of the findings that came about?
Well, there was definitely, there was a survey done and it tried to kind of broad spectrum from all ages and financial situations, and to try to see what are the conversations that are happening, what is going on when it comes to how we're sharing these stresses, or how we are dealing with what the current situation is. From the finding, more than 50% actually said that they prefer not to talk about their finances at all. They didn't want to discuss it. They were struggling, but there was no reaching out to anyone, whether that was family or friends. In fact, 8 out of 10 said it was difficult to turn to family. They didn't want to reach out to family. And the reasoning behind some of this was really unfortunate, because I think we do guard ourselves so much that when we're afraid to share these things, a lot of times we have to look at why. From these sort of polls, and as they broke down a little further into that information, they actually said that, in Ontario particularly, it was kind of a little bit higher rate than some of the other provinces. But in Ontario, they said that about 86% said that they have now admitted that they can't afford their groceries. So these are pretty staggering statistics to think right now when we've all seen it. We've gone to the grocery store. We know kind of that impact of, can I provide for my family? Can I take care of that? And the fact that when we're all feeling that crunch, but we're afraid to say anything. The vast majority have said that it's difficult to discuss with their families because they don't want it to look like they're asking for help. They're not wanting to make it seem like, I need a loan. I need to borrow some money. They're trying to be very independent, and unfortunately, being able to have that support system is really necessary at times like this.
And it seems like there's, sorry to interrupt, it seems like there's a bit of a generational difference as well between sort of younger Canadians and maybe the baby boomer generation as well. Mm-hmm. Is there differences in those respects?
Oh, for sure. I think when we look at the various generations, I do think that, among sort of Canadians about 35 and over, really the statistics show that about 69% actually said that they feared being judged. They felt ashamed. They were embarrassed. They didn't want to kind of reach out for those, the feeling of failure. I haven't done this on my own. Even a third of older millennials and Gen Xers, they actually said that they feared that, again, am I asking for money? How is this going to reflect upon me if I bring that topic up? Even if I just want to share what's happening, how am I going to be judged? I think when we look at the younger generation, about a third of them are saying that they just don't want to discuss it because they don't understand. They don't understand what it means. What are the different sort of levels of financial literacy? Such a misconception that it's just about a budget. So much more to our financial literacy than just budgeting. It's looking at all of those other areas.
And does this poll tell us anything about why people are feeling this shame or embarrassment about talking about their finances?
I think a lot of it is looking to see some of the responses that people have had when it came to sort of why they were answering the way they were. I mean, we had some responses that they just literally felt ashamed. They should have had it all together. They're professionals. Why are they working and living paycheck to paycheck? They don't want people to judge them. They don't want anyone to know that something is wrong. They feel like somehow they have failed and their life is falling apart. And it's so sad to hear, people who are working so hard and trying so hard to keep things together are feeling this way.
So how do you manage your money in a changing world? How do you improve your financial literacy and know-how? We're going to have some great advice for you after the break when Money Matters returns.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Today, I helped a parent feed their family by connecting them to a food program.
Today, I helped someone connect with mental health supports.
Today, I helped a couple struggling to pay their bills access financial aid.
Every day, 211 navigators connect Canadians to critical government and community programs and services.
211. Help starts here.
Focus better.
Partner better.
Sleep better.
Breathe better.
Love better. Work better. Friend better. unwind better.
Everything gets better when you get active.
Welcome back to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. My guest today is Kirsten Bradley, Senior Insolvency Administrator with BDO Debt Solutions. And today we're talking about Financial Literacy Month, which is marked every November here in Canada. Now, the theme this year is Managing Your Money in a Changing World. A key focus for the month is equipping Canadians with practical tips and tools to help them managing their finances. We know more Canadians, including many here in Ontario, are carrying large debt burdens, and higher interest rates are impacting their ability to manage this debt, which then is affecting their overall financial well-being. So how do we turn this around? Well, there's actually lots of things that you can do. The Financial Consumer Agency of Canada has highlighted some of the many things that you can focus on in this Financial Literacy Month, and we're going to get into that right now. And so the FCAC is recommending you take the pulse of your financial health and check up on your debt. And there's no doubt that taking stock of your financial situation has never been more important than now. So Kirsten, what are some ways that our viewers can do a financial health checkup?
Well, definitely, looking at the budget, looking and reviewing our budget. A lot of people will say, oh, I have a budget and I'm running with that budget. But in reality, we're not. We might have created a budget 5 years ago. We might have created a budget when we started a new job. We have to remember that our budgets are fluid. They're always evolving, and we have to evolve with that. So we have to kind of take a look again. We have to go through, make sure you're breaking down those expenses, looking at our debt management, taking a breakdown to see what exactly do I have in terms of my debt and how am I going to set a plan to pay that off. When we talk about that financial literacy, we're talking more about looking at our retirement plans, looking at our risk for the future so that we've set ourselves up and protected for those unforeseen events that could happen. Understanding interest rates, understanding inflation, things that we might have just kind of avoided discussing in the past. We need to do the research and look into it. But along with just the budgeting and reviewing our budgets, you also want to make sure you're doing things like checking your credit report. Now, majority of Canadians are not looking at their reports. They're maybe taking a glance and not really diving into, are those reports accurate? What is that report telling me about my financial well-being? Our reports and our credit scores really are used as a tool. They're used as a tool by our lenders to see where our financial health is. So if we're watching that there's some mistakes or we're watching our score dropping, those are major warning signs. Those are things that we really need to kind of take hold of and not ignore. There could be reasons behind it. Maybe there's some fraud involved or some identity theft. Something like that could be happening. But maybe it's something that about the choices we're making. Maybe we're constantly running late on a payment. Those are important things that we really want to see from those reports to ensure that we're keeping them correct. And if it comes down to it, talk to a professional. Don't be afraid to make that call, whether it's talking to a financial planner, talking to our bank. There are a lot of people out there who are waiting and willing to talk about the finances and talk about what they can do to assist you in, kind of building a secure future for yourself.
I like that you said, obviously everything starts with a budget. And it came to mind. I was watching something online, and she was doing a budget sort of video, and she actually sits down every day or every payday, and she has a routine where she calls it giving her money jobs, and she'll allocate a certain amount to this particular bill, and the way she described it was she's giving her money work to do. And I thought that was an interesting way of going about setting that budget, because it wasn't, the word budget is sort of a negative connotation, I think, where we're saying to ourselves, we can't spend our money. Whereas if you're giving your money a job to do, then you feel more empowered. You're more confident in how you're managing your finances. So I think that's definitely part of learning this financial literacy part, because you're going to be able to avoid those scams. You mentioned identity theft and things like that can happen to everybody. But it also gives us a little bit more knowledge where we can protect ourselves from any kind of pitfalls that might be out there. And so I agree with everything that you were saying there. And so along with the importance of managing a budget and managing our debt, which of course there's lots of value in that, what about how do we move forward? Can we focus on that a little bit and talk about setting some goals, I think, for how we use our money? Why is setting some financial goals so important?
Well, it's definitely important because I think the key piece behind all of this is ensuring that we have a plan in place, that we are not feeling overwhelmed by our finances. And unfortunately, the surveys are definitely showing that really more than a third of Canadians feel stress and anxiety and depression and are suffering from mental health issues because of their budget, because of financial. When we think of those terms, I think one of the most amazing surveys that is out there is Scotiabank Worry Survey, where they said Canadians are worrying about their finances for about 15 hours a week. Well, that's a part-time job. So we are spending more time thinking and worrying about this than having a second job out there, but we're not getting any benefits from it. The worry isn't giving us anything. We're not getting any payback from it. So we need to be able to feel like we're on top of it. We need to feel like that overwhelming feeling, we can handle it. We can be able to come up with a plan that's going to guide us into our future. And I think that's the most important thing is knowing I can set a plan in place. I can set some goals in place. I can educate myself and my family to be able to kind of even push the next generation forward without carrying the same fears. And that's really what, this financial literacy and being able to strive for our future is all about.
Now, is it important for us to set sort of short-term and long-term goals? Is there a difference between the two of those?
It's very important to set our goals. And I think it's unfortunately one of those things that people forget to do. And it's important to set goals for everything we are doing, whether it's those things like our emergency savings, those things that what I like to call the someday list savings. And those are the things where we talk about a lot of setting goals for someday I would love to be able to buy a new couch. Someday I'd love to buy a new car. We have a lot of conversations with ourselves, but we don't do anything to make those goals happen. So it is so important to set the goal in place to be able to know that we are striving towards reaching and fulfilling those goals.
Can you lay out what exactly is a SMART goal?
Definitely. So SMART goals can actually help us in terms of something called a short-term and something called a long-term goal. So when we talk about a short-term goal, really we're talking about something that's going to happen within the next year. It's got a shorter time frame. Long-term is into our future, maybe 5 years or more. And when we talk about a SMART goal is really breaking down and kind of looking at the acronym. So S represents being specific. M is measurable or something we can monitor. A is achievable or attainable. R is realistic. Can we break it down? And T is timely. So looking at our goals, whether they are those longer term ones or shorter term ones, that is really kind of the acronym you want to look at. Now let's sort of talk a little bit about an example, an emergency fund. So everybody needs to have an emergency fund. And, obviously having that for some people is far more attainable than others. But having something in place and saying, that's my specific goal. My goal is my emergency fund. Measurable. Well, I want to be able to save $3,000 in a year. I want to have that tucked away just in case something happens. And that something could be anything, a loss of job, illness, any of those things. That's where that emergency fund comes into play. Achievable. Well, now I know that I either have to earn a little bit more or spend a little less, because it's not just going to pop up in our budget. We have to make it happen. So then I have to set a realistic term. If I know I need that in a year, if I know that's my goal, how do I make it happen? And that's where timely comes into play. Look at it in terms of if I want to do that in 6 months, well, that would mean $500 a month. Is that really realistic? Comes back to that? No, maybe it's not. But maybe I could put in a year $250 a month away. Okay, maybe that's more realistic. And those goals can really be in place even for something as simple as setting up a date night. You know, we forget about those things and often we'll just do a quick drive-through or we won't let date night happen. And it's important to be able to set even something as simple as that. Look at that, break it down, and make sure that you're making it part of your weekly sort of budget plan. Know that you're putting a little bit aside, and maybe it won't happen every month, but if you can put a little aside, you're going to gain from that in terms of what your goal is.
Those are really great examples of short-term goals. Do you have an example of maybe a long-term SMART goal?
So a long-term goal would be something looking at maybe our retirement savings, planning for our future, knowing that as I'm planning my long-term, it might involve starting right now. And in fact, it should involve starting right now. Being able to say, okay, even if I can put $50 a month or $25 a month, every month building towards that goal, knowing that I've made it something that I can afford to do that's going to build towards my future. So you want, again, to break it into the budget. Don't set a goal that's so unrealistic that the next thing you're pulling from those funds or you're having to adjust your living expense because you can't afford what you've set in place. That's not realistic. And I think that's the most key component of all of this is be true to yourself. What can you really give up to make those goals happen?
I would add one thing when it comes to setting goals, writing them down, I think is so important to have it physically written down in front of you. Definitely. What the goal is, because the act of actually writing it down just makes it more concrete in our minds. And so I would just add that one part when it comes to these setting goals. So thank you very much for those examples. I think that's really helpful for everybody. And so for our viewers then that are also interested in growing their financial skills, what kind of resources or tools can they look up?
Well, there are definitely a lot of resources. Even in terms of writing it down, there are websites like the Financial Consumer Agency that will allow you to actually print off some PDF forms or some Excel spreadsheets when it comes to budgeting and when it comes to goal setting. Utilize those skills. Looking at the Equifax website, there's a lot of information about our reports from that. Going to the libraries, bookstores. I mean, going back to good old paper and writing that information down and looking through those budgets. Obviously there are online services and podcasts that are out talking about finances, talking about, goal setting and budgeting and debt management. Obviously shows such as this, being able to reach out and hear information that probably is hitting home to a lot of people. Learn, absorb whatever you can in terms of the resources that are out there.
And I would also add, if you're available to talk to a financial professional, reach out to somebody like that as well, just to educate yourself, at least on your particular situation, where you can go from here. So Kirsten, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I also want to thank you, our viewers, for watching. Until next time, I'm Shannon Jackson.
Call the Rogers TV Viewer Response Line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
Are you low on food? Struggling to pay the bills? Overwhelmed by life's challenges?